Okay, we are now recording on November 13th, 2011, and we're using our set-top microphone, so the audio is not going to be the greatest. So, for the record, state your full name, including maiden.
Janice Elaine Navarro Otten.
Okay, and we'll go basic. We'll do numerology to start. So, you have brothers and sisters.
I had 6 brothers and sisters.
Okay, and name them in chronological order.
Is this a test?
Yes, it is actually. It's an old trick.
It's Dolores, who became Sister Mary Richard, and then Sister Dolores. Dick, Richard.
Okay, he was always Uncle Dick. That's fine.
Margie, Ken, Evelyn, me, and Bev.
Okay. And then, who were your parents?
Frank and Cecilia Navarro.
Neither one who are still here, obviously.
No, there are only 3 of us left out of the whole family.
Okay. What's, if you had to name one trait or specific memory about each sibling, what would it be? You already said Dolores. She was a nun and she was a teacher.
Well, yeah, she was a teacher. Didn't really get to know her until I was older, because she entered the convent when I was 2. So I didn't know her. We'd go down to New Orleans to visit, and that's how I gradually got to know her. She had a degree, a master's, I believe, in music. And she came out of the convent in 1973.
Okay. And then what? She just lives at work, or she just lives at home, or she retired?
She lived at home with my mom and worked at Fifth Third Bank for a while. And then she went to, is it Family Services, or what did she do? She got something for Hilda.
Oh, from my grandmother?
Yeah.
It's fine. We're gonna do
Health
just
and
all
Human
for
Services.
all you at home. We're gonna do the same thing we did for the Big O. We had Big Jano sitting back here when he was interviewed, so we can do the same thing. Have the
Okay.
peanut gallery. So
Get out of here.
no. Go ahead. She did the same thing for you. So.
You got for Hilda? She helped Hilda? Is that what she did? When she
Yeah,
was down here?
with the insurance, or
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she
The
was on
medical.
Medicaid, or she didn't have any money, so she was on that Medicaid.
well, we know that, but I'm talking about what department. I think
Yeah.
it was Health and Human Services or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
Well, you have to briefly explain. And what I'll do is I'm going to edit this part out. What this is going to be is just pretend like someone is going to watch this. Here, I will do this. We're going to cut.
To where?
All right. So we're picking up again. We're talking about Dolores, but you threw out the name Hilda. Very briefly, who's Hilda?
Hilda is Jim's grandmother.
Yeah.
Or was.
Yes. Okay.
And
the cancer.
Okay.
back to Dolores. She retired from Health and Human Services, or whatever it was, department she worked for. She lived at home with Mom for a while and took care of Mom because she was not in good health.
Now, was this in the 70s? Because Grandpa Frank died in 1972.
Right.
So did Dolores return home when they were both still living, or did she just return home when your mom lived by herself? Was there a period of time when Grandma Cecilia lived at home by herself?
Yeah. And when Dolores came out of the convent, then she moved in with my mother.
Now, do you think that was she moved in with her out of convenience or because of her then being alone? I mean, do you think Dolores would have done something else had Grandpa still been alive?
Possibly.
Okay.
She probably would have gotten her own apartment, which she did after Mom died.
Okay.
And sold the house on Beacon Street. And Dolores...
1742 Beacon Street.
Yes.
Yes.
And she went into an apartment across from the house in Mount Washington, and she died.
Look at the camera.
She's fine. She's
I'm
fine.
fine.
She's
I'm
fine.
thinking. She died in 1996,
Mm-hmm.
in July.
Mm-hmm.
And Mom died in
93. It was January of 93.
I thought it was 4.
January of 93.
Greg knows.
Okay.
Good job, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Dolores. Now let's go next to Dick. What's your more distinct memories of him? Because it sounds like there was a big age gap. So real quick before you move on to him, was there any point in time in your lifetime where you were all born and you all lived under the same roof?
No.
So there was that big of an age gap.
Yes.
I mean, how old was Dolores?
I think she was 16 when she...
When you were born?
No. She was born in 1926.
Okay, so 1926, and when was Bev born?
I can't remember.
50?
November 21st, 1950. Yeah.
50? Was she born in 50?
Okay. Okay.
There's
So,
8 years.
so there was never a time where you all lived under the same roof?
No. No. Never.
Did Dick ever live there? Did he?
Yeah.
What was the most people who lived under one roof at one time? We'll edit that out. Hang on. All right, so we had a Christmas interruption.
It's every hour. So.
All right, so the most people who lived in under one roof at one time was
6.
okay. All right, so your brother Dick. What were your more distinct memories of him?
He was in the Air Force, and I was very close to him and his one friend, Bob Klein, who would come to the house with him when they would be home on leave or anything, and there was just always a bond between Dick and I.
Do you know why? Anything special happened?
No?
How old was he when you were born?
Well, he was born in 1927. So, and I was in 42.
So he was 15 when you were born.
Yeah. And anyway, when he got married,
But he was a soldier, right?
he was in the Air Force. He served with Jimmy Stewart, who was formerly a very big actor in Hollywood movies.
Mm-hmm. And this was World War II or Korea?
World War II, I believe.
If he was born in 1927,
Yeah.
so and World War II was 41 to
He
45.
only
So
been 15. It was probably Korea.
I really don't remember.
When was Bob born? Bob Knapp. He was 80 last night. How old would Ken be, or would Dick be now?
1927.
Oh, 27.
So anyway, he would have been two. It sounds like he would have been the youngest at the end of World War II to actually be able to go in. So it sounds like Korea.
Yeah, sounds like Korea, Jane.
Okay.
Yeah, that could very well be.
Okay. But anyway.
And my one big memory of him was when we lived on Hunley Road. He built a set of stone steps in front of the house going down a short hill. And he put a penny and a newspaper from that date in or under one of the stones. And as far as I know, it's still there. Now it looks dumpy. It's not taken care of. But that was one of my bigger memories of him.
Okay. And then he got married pretty young?
No, he wasn't too young. His oldest son is 6 months younger than Bev. So he was married around 48 or 49.
1948.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and he has, so we've obviously gone through Dolores. She was a nun, so she didn't have any kids.
No.
Dick obviously has kids.
He had 7 children.
Do you know all their names off the top of your head?
Steve, Rick, Tom, Cindy. How many is that, 4? Greg, Don, and Linda.
Okay.
Linda's the youngest.
And that was with his first wife, who was named
Mary.
Mary. Okay, and I say first wife knowing, when did they divorce?
I can't remember. It was in the 70s.
Okay.
I think we were married then.
Got married in 69.
Yeah. But I mean, when
Well,
Dick and
did he meet Mary? He knew Mary?
I got her, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get along with Mary at all?
I got along fine because I gave the kids presents all the time for Christmas and birthdays. And she made a point of telling me that they really liked getting cards and presents. And at that time, I didn't say anything, but I had 1 or 2 kids, and, you know, I said to myself, yes, I know. They never got anything from them.
Meaning that when you had kids, they didn't get any cards from Mary or Dick?
No.
Okay.
Well, Dick didn't really know
Fair enough.
who was who. But,
Okay, well, when Dick was in the Air Force, what did he do for a living? Like after that?
many things.
And I'm asking for myself too, because I honestly don't know a whole lot about what he did.
Insurance. He was an insurance.
Well, yeah, but
But
he worked for Singer Sewing Machine Company, selling sewing machines. He's worked for Strobridge Graphics. I'm not sure what he did there.
But he was a big shot for somebody, wasn't he?
And then he got a position with Prudential Insurance
Right.
and did very well.
He was a vice president there, I believe, wasn't he? I think he was.
He was up there, but I'm not sure what.
I believe he was.
He was still out selling
Yeah,
insurance.
but he was a pretty big shot there. It's pretty
Yeah.
yeah.
he won several awards with Prudential for sales. And he retired from Prudential.
Okay, and he remarried?
He remarried while he was still working. He met Jane McElveen. I'm not sure where, but they both liked to dance, and I'm thinking that he met her at some dance when they had them for singles. And they went together for maybe a year, and they got married. And I can't remember what year, but it's been 20 some odd years that they were married.
Okay, before he died.
Well, yeah.
No, not 20 years from now, because he's been dead for about, what, 10 years now? And we're in 2011?
He died in 2001.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
Same year as Margie.
Okay, and so, and just going back, because one trait, if anybody sees this video and if they're going to research and they're going to look at old pictures, there was one physical trait of Dick. What was that?
He had sustained an injury at birth. The doctor used forceps to help him out of the birth canal, and it pressed on an eyelid on his, I think, left eye, and did nerve damage. So it was always just barely opened, and he was legally blind in that eye.
So how did he ever get in the Air Force with that?
He passed the test for being in the Air Force, but they said he couldn't fly. He couldn't pilot, which is what he really wanted to do. And I remember him saying that he and Jimmy Stewart were flying. Stewart was the pilot. And somehow, they were talking about the Air Force, and Dick was telling him how much he had wanted to pilot. So Jimmy turned it over to him and let him pilot the plane. He remained friends with Stewart until Jimmy Stewart died before Dick, I think.
Yeah, he died in the 80s.
Yeah. And they remained friends that whole time.
And in the 20s, that was obviously before medical malpractice. You don't know if your parents were able to do anything because of the doctor doing that to his eye?
No, I don't know anything about the circumstances. Just know that he was a very handsome man, and it did mar his appearance in that eye was always drooping, and people would stare.
But he wore a patch, didn't he, later? Didn't he? I thought he wore a patch.
No, he didn't wear a patch.
No, there's no
look at
picture.
that big picture there, and there's no patch.
Yeah.
Where?
Okay,
Yeah.
all good. Okay, so that's Dick. So next in line would be
Margie.
Okay, and what are
Margie worked at Fifth Third Bank. She knew Pete Rose when he was a toddler. She worked with his father. I can't remember what his dad did, whether he repaired machines, did something mechanical, or if it was maintenance, general maintenance. And sometimes Petey would come to see his dad. And that's how she knew Pete.
Okay, and what year was she born?
I can't remember when she was born. Let's see, Dick was 27.
When she was born?
31.
What do you mean 20? What do you mean?
Somewhere in the early 30s.
Where you come
probably.
up with the 27? I don't know.
Dick was born in
Oh,
1927.
1927. 1927. Okay.
So probably
Yeah.
early 30s.
It had to be
So she was died in 2001. So what
at
year?
69.
Well, subtract 69 from 2001.
So
So she was
1930.
born in 32.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But anyway.
Anyway, and she worked and dated as she was a very beautiful woman. She was Miss Congeniality at her prom. She went to St. Joseph Academy, which was an all-girls school run by the Sisters of St. Joseph, and it later became the first co-ed Catholic school in the Archdiocese, McNicholas High School, and it remains McNicholas. She graduated from there, I believe it was 1949,
Okay.
and it just happened that she was in Dick's first wife's class. They went to school together. And they remained in touch with each other through Margie's life. Anyway, she decided one year that she was not happy working. She felt she wanted to do something else, which we found out later was mission work. And she entered the convent in 1953, the same order as Dolores.
But can I ask a question here?
Mm-hmm.
About the time you said she was engaged, you didn't go to that.
She was engaged right at when she made her decision.
Yeah, she was engaged to be married, so it got okay. Yeah, you forgot that.
So, how it sucks to be that guy who forced his fiancée into the convent. What kind of a jerk was he?
Well, it was my aunt's brother.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Who, my Aunt Mary Sack.
She was engaged to your aunt's brother?
Mm-hmm.
How's that possible? Isn't there some law against that?
No. They weren't
think so.
related.
Okay. Anyway. Okay, so she was engaged to somebody and then she decided to go in the convent.
Yes.
Do you think that was heavily influenced by Dolores, or do you think it was entirely on her own?
I think it was on her own because her desires were entirely different than Dolores. I mean, Dolores taught school, and she was happy doing that. And but Margie had other things that she wanted to do. So she became a nun. She studied in New Orleans and received her vows and began teaching in New Orleans. And then she was transferred back to Cincinnati, where she taught briefly at McNick. Then she was principal at Immaculate Heart of Mary School. She was also principal at St. Thomas More School, both in Cincinnati. And it was at St. Thomas More that she decided she wanted more than teaching. She wanted to go into the missions. And the nuns fought her at first. And she told them that if they wouldn't allow her to go into mission work, then she would leave and go with an order that would. So they allowed it. She studied in Mexico. She studied in
Cuba?
She visited Cuba. But she went to, I can't think of it. I've told you 1,000 times.
Panama? Venezuela?
No, that was
Nicaragua?
That's where she went.
Chile.
Oh, okay.
Chile. She studied in Chile where no English was spoken, so she had to learn Spanish. And from there, she went to a mission in Panama and got that going. It was during, I guess, the peak of communism, and it was in the 60s. I visited her in Panama in 1966, and it was when the college students were being pushed to rebel against America.
And what did you think of that experience of going there?
Well, it was different because they had soldiers posted along the roadways from Panama City up into the mountains, and we would have to stop, and Margie would have to, tell them who she was and who we were, that we were just visiting.
I mean, what was the reason that you decided then to go visit her in Panama? It seems like a big trip. It seems like a big trip.
It was a big trip, and I had the opportunity to travel with a girl who was, the nuns paid her way to Cincinnati to study, and she was going back, so I had someone to go back with who knew the language, and a friend who was going to go into the convent in a couple of months went with me, and that was Judy Smith Wessels. And we experienced the burned out buildings that the students were told were American, and they had maybe an American name, but it was all things to benefit them, but they weren't being told that. We saw people living in cardboard houses, huts, naked children in dirty puddles.
How long were you there for?
A week, I believe. And on the flight to Panama, when we got over Cuba, we had 2 escort jets, Cubans. This was around the time of, in the 60s, and the Bay of Pigs had taken place, and all those things that went on in communist Cuba. And we weren't allowed in their airspace. So we had these escorts. And then they had soldiers posted at the airport in Panama.
Were they American soldiers or Panamanian soldiers?
Panamanian.
Okay.
But it was very militarized. We could not wear shorts. We went out in shorts one day, and as we were leaving the hotel, one of the room service people or somebody who worked there said that we should not go out in public in shorts. So we had to go back to the room to change into skirts. And that's all changed. And we visited the original part of Panama.
Okay.
Panama Viejo is what it was called, and it's basically just a short tower, stone tower, and it's where is it Ponce de Leon landed there. Somebody landed there, and that's where he landed.
Okay. When Margie wanted to be a mission backup, was that in the 50s or the 60s when she originally went to the convent? It was the 50s. But when she left the country, I guess what I'm getting at is, what was the response of your parents to what she did when she left and when she went to out of the country? Do you know? I mean, you were old enough.
Dad never expressed anything. Mom was always asking her to come home. She did not want her in foreign countries. You know, why can't you do it at home is what Mom was saying. And she couldn't understand Margie's way of thinking, of teaching these people who were not free that they could be free.
Mm-hmm. But just on a familial level, though, on just in the family circle kind of a thing.
She was always asking her to come home.
But you don't know how your dad took it?
I don't know. I think he was very proud of her. He had always wanted one of us to speak Spanish because he originated from Spain himself. I mean, his father was from Spain. But he never said much. Mom was very vocal about her coming home to do her mission work. And Margie couldn't get her to understand that those people...
No, I'll go this way. Don't worry.
Hang on.
Oh, I'll go.
Okay, after Captain Interruptus walks through. Alright, so we're on Margie, and you didn't know what your dad's thoughts were on it, but he said he wanted somebody to speak Spanish, so...
Yes, so he was proud of her and what she was doing. But it was several years before she got into the thick of the mission work. In Panama, essentially she was kicked out of Panama because she was causing people to realize that they had rights. The men would work for these landowners who own hundreds and hundreds of acres, and they would work for about a quarter a day, all day. When they would get their pay, instead of providing for their families who lived in little grass huts or mud huts, they would get drunk. And then they'd get out and start fighting and kill each other or injure each other. And she taught them. She was in a little, like a pueblo village type thing, and up in the mountains, miles from Panama City. It was beautiful, but it was called San Francisco. And she taught them hygiene, the women especially, showed them what soap was. And they would go to a river where there was a waterfall not far from this little village, and they would wash in the river. And
is that what you did, or did you have indoor plumbing when you visited her in Panama?
they had a shower, an outdoor shower. It was Well, no, I think the shower was inside. It was an outdoor John, which Margie decided it would be kind of funny when Judy and I went out there to brush our teeth, etc., before calling it a night. We were both in there brushing our teeth and doing whatever. And we hear this deep voice saying something in Spanish. And it scared the you-know-what out of both of us. Because it was, I don't know, maybe 75 feet from the little house where the nuns lived and where we were staying. And I can't remember, we finally opened the door and it was Margie. And I had some shaving cream in a can and I started spraying her with it. And chased her around their little house. Oh, you can't do that. I'm a nun. And I said, yes, I can. You're my sister. So she liked to pull things like that. And one of the other nuns, Sister Malachi, short-sheeted us one time. And they thought that was pretty funny. I met the bishop, did a portrait of him while I was there, Bishop McGrath, and I met him when we went to the village of San Francisco, to the church where they had somebody in a coffin that you could view, some saint. I don't know who it was supposed to be. And we saw, I'm not sure I don't think we attended Mass. I think it was in the afternoon when we were there. And, no kneelers, just benches. And the people were very religious, but it was a superstitious religion. And the little tiny, tiny church in the Pueblo, we went in there. It was just across from the house, and Margie opened the, sacristy door. And there was a statue there of Christ with real hair on it, and it looked real. It scared us to death, And the people were always having processions, religious processions, and would carry that statue, and the women would contribute hair for the statues of Christ, their hair. But it made for a very scary Jesus because his eyes were just wide open and staring. Beautiful fixtures. It was a solid silver baptismal font where the babies were baptized. A lot of silver because there was silver in those mountains that people weren't allowed to mine it. But it was wealthy in that way. But the people were suppressed. Uh-huh. There was a priest I did not meet, but he was murdered, and Margie was searching for his body. I don't know if she ever found it, but that was right before they kicked her out because the people were starting to realize what was going on, thanks to her teaching them.
So, when she was doing all this missionary work, how did she survive? Was she given some sort of a salary, or did she just find a convent and move in there? Do you have any idea of the mechanism of all these places that she went to, how she actually survived on a day-to-day basis? Did she have support from somewhere
Well, support from the nuns. That was the argument she had before she went on mission work.
Mm-hmm.
Because they would have to support her. And they were hesitant about that. And since they've got several missions around and around the world, but she did finally convince them that this was the work she was meant to do. And apparently it was because the people loved her. They would, when she would go out of the house, they would come up and hug her. And, of course, I don't know what they were saying because they didn't speak English or Spanish. But she was very well loved.
And so she was in Panama, and then where did she go to?
Well, after she got kicked out of Panama, she went to a place in Mexico called Nezahualcóyotl. It's hard to explain, to say. It's just outside of Acapulco. And these poor people live around the city dump. And that's where they get their food. Is it goes through the dump, which is all food from hotels in Acapulco, mainly. And she wasn't there too long. And then she went to, who was the one that was at war?
Nicaragua?
No, not Nicaragua, but...
Argentina?
No.
Peru?
It starts with an S.
S.
I can't think.
Salvador? El Salvador?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was in El Salvador for a while, and there was a civil war going on between them and the Sandinistas. And she was taking refugees into her apartment who had managed to get away, and she went into El Salvador because there was another bishop who had been saying Mass, and he was murdered, well, during Mass. And they had pictures of him lying at the altar in all the vestments and the blood and everything. And they had an idea who did it, but she went in and dressed as a pregnant woman to get these pictures. And she got the pictures, but she also got detained. And I think spent a night in jail or something, but they did let her keep the pictures. And then they let her go. What she did with those, I'm not sure. Whether they went to some authority or not. I don't know what happened after that.
But then she eventually got to Nicaragua.
Yeah, from El Salvador she went to Nicaragua.
And that was in the 80s?
Yes, 80. 1983,
And that's where she started the place. She started
Yeah.
the mission.
Yeah.
and there was nothing there. And she was given some land, desert type land, by the government, and she and a priest from Spain, Padre Angel, built with their own hands and the help of some other people, built this building, started a school, and it was mostly, at that time, cooking and sewing, things, domestic things like that. And to make a long story short, now there are about 800 students in this school since she died. There is, they have a group of people who run it. They're mostly Americans who have taken over for her. And it just keeps growing, adults and children. They'll travel. Padre Angel was a musician and taught them music. And they would travel all over, sponsored by different places in the United States mostly. And they would be in their dress and sing and dance, do their original local dances and sing, and it was very beautiful. And she became more and more well known in Washington. She went there several times, and objecting to supplying weapons to the Sandinistas when, as I understand it, our government was thinking they were helping, and they were helping the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And she got that established. She was interviewed in Cincinnati when she would get here. Well known but not well publicized. And before she died, it was just a few days before she died. She died from cancer, and Daniel Ortega, who was the president and who was running for president again, came to visit her. And he had sent beautiful flowers at her funeral, and she told him what she thought of his government. He was a womanizer, and he headed the Sandinistas for a long time. And he is still president. He was just re-elected again. She was cremated when she died, but she did die at her home, which she called Batahola. And her ashes were put in a garden that was built in her honor, and a few sprinkled around her little cottage. And there's a monument in Guardian Angel Cemetery with her name on it, and one of the doctor who took care of her came to Cincinnati with just a little dab of her ashes and sprinkled them around her monument, because she wanted to die in Nicaragua with her family.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm sure if Mom was alive, she would have had a fit.
So, back in the era before Skype and before cell phones and everything, just bringing it back more home, when she was on all these missions, was it like a letter a month, or, I mean, how did she correspond? You said that your mom would always say, come home. Was it writing a letter and 4 months later you'd hear back? Did she call home every once in a while? How did you keep track of where she was and what she was doing?
She didn't call home. We would find out from other nuns, you know, if she was moving to another country or mission or whatever.
Like, how did you find out where she was in Panama and make that trip?
Because of this girl, I can't think of her name right off. Oh, Telma was her name. And the nuns had paid for her to study here. When we got to Panama, we went to her home, which was called a finca. It was like a farm, but it was in Panama City. And we went there for dinner. And they had soup for our openers, and it was like chicken broth, and they put the heart of the chicken in mine as a welcoming gift. And I leaned over to Margie and said, if I eat that, I'll puke. So.
But I guess, how did she find out that you were coming? I mean, did you just...
Well, we told her, we communicated back and forth by letter.
Okay.
It was hard to reach her by phone. You would have to call, and if somebody answered, you know, you have to know the language. One time when Mom was taken to the hospital, we had Kate come over, and
You had...
I called down there.
You had Kate come over?
Yes.
Where are you?
She was living here.
No, you're back up here. Okay, so the point. So okay,
I
Kate,
got off the track of how did we keep.
No, that's fine. You did, but okay.
But anyway,
Tell your story. Kate was Dad's sister.
Was here and was well versed in Spanish. So we had her call Margie, and she talked in Spanish to whoever it was who answered the phone and told her what was going on. And, what are you doing? He decided he's going to dust.
No problem. Just keep on going.
And anyway, getting back to your original question. How we kept in touch was through the nuns, letters from Mark.
And we're back. Okay. So we got the peanut gallery back here making noise. So it was all the communication, but you mainly communicated by letter, by mail?
Yes.
Okay. And for rare phone calls?
Very rare phone calls. But,
okay. And then she would come home, obviously, because there's old home movie
there
footage.
were times when she came home, and when she was sick, very sick, and had surgery for her cancer, which was terminal. Evelyn and Sherry, Ken's wife, and I went to visit her in New Orleans at the hospital. And from there, she eventually went back to Nicaragua, and she had this doctor who worked at the mission, and she took care of Margie. And she toughed it out until she died. She kept going until she couldn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But She would come home for just visit. When she was sick, she was coming into New Orleans for treatments, chemo, whatever. She even traveled somewhere in Mexico to try some kind of herbs or something to cure her cancer, but didn't work. So when Ken died in 1998, she was here to help him, and said to me, asked me how old he was, and then how old was Dolores when she died, and how old was Dad when he died, and she was asking me when with each one, and I said, why, is there something going on? And she said, no, I was just curious. And
So you think she knew she had cancer then?
I think she knew she had something. She went to the hospital in Managua, and of course they don't have the sophisticated equipment that we have here. I mean, they had some, but to a point. And they diagnosed her with cancer. And then the nuns made her come back to New Orleans and took her to the doctor, the hospital, for tests. And it was aggressive ovarian cancer and had spread all through her body. But even her last visit to the United States, I took her to the airport. And she insisted on walking in to the airport. I wanted to get a red cap to bring a wheelchair, but she didn't want that. And I could tell that she was ready to drop when she was walking in. And when she got down to New Orleans, she had to have 5 units of blood. She had very little blood in her body. And but she would push herself to keep going. So she died where she wanted to die and did her mission work, and is well known all over the country and beyond. Good friends with Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote Dead Man Walking, which was later
Movie in a book.
in a movie, made into a movie.
And she's
What?
a saint now, isn't she? Or there's talk or something?
There was talk of them looking into having her canonized or blessed,
Margie?
but I haven't heard any more. And that was over a year ago that I heard that. But I do know it takes quite a while. They have to have proof of miracles, which Gary one time said, she didn't have any miracles, did she? And I said, yeah, she built all these missions and got people educated, and that was a miracle in considering what she had to work with. Yeah, donations and things like that, and built it up.
Okay. All right. Let's hold on, Margie. Okay, so that was the long story. Fix the camera. That was the long story of Sister Margarita, or Marguerite, or Margaret.
In Spanish, it's Margarita.
Okay.
And Navarro is spelled with 2 R's.
Okay, so next in line would be
Ken.
Ken. Full name was Ken.
Kenneth Edward.
You think that was intentional to make his initials spell out his name?
No.
Just accident?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was born in 1933 on my dad's 33rd birthday. Of course, obviously, I wasn't even born. So there's not too much I know about him growing up, other than that when he went to school, he wouldn't talk. He wouldn't answer questions. He wouldn't speak. And one nun who had him at Guardian Angel said, I don't know if he's learning or not. And it turned out he died a millionaire.
Who did?
But he was a mute, or he just
No, he just
shy?
wouldn't talk.
Who was that, Jan?
Ken.
Oh, he died a millionaire.
For
Ken,
as
talking about
much as
Ken.
he talked when he was an adult, he wouldn't answer questions or anything. And Sister Mary Edward, I believe, said, I don't know what he knows. Because he,
So when you were growing up, younger days, you said you were closer to Dick. What were your memories of Ken growing up?
him dating a girl who went to McNick, and he went to Purcell High School. We lived on Hunley Road, which was 2 or 3 miles from school,
That thing's gonna go off again in there.
and he was supposed
Okay, well, hang on.
It's gonna go off.
Alright, we took a small break so the Christmas clock would go. So you were talking about Ken dating somebody and you were a couple miles away from school.
Yeah, and he was supposed to pick me up and
Look at the
bring me
clock.
home from school.
Look at the.
And I can remember one time it was pouring down rain. Ken didn't show up to pick me up, so I walked home and was drenched.
Do you know how old you are?
I don't remember. I think it might have been 4th or 5th grade at the most, maybe younger. But I can remember Mom reaming him out for letting me walk home in all that rain, and because we couldn't ride buses then.
But you were right up the street there at school, right? Up at what do you call it from the house?
No, dear. This was when we lived on Hunley
Oh,
Road.
okay.
But that's mainly, he worked at Fifth Third Bank, and for several years he was in the service in the Army. I don't know, he repaired watches and clocks.
Fifth Third, he repaired typewriters, equipment.
I'll get there.
Okay.
And when he came out of the Army, Margie was still working at Fifth Third, and she got him a job there, and he was working repairing office equipment like typewriters and whatever they had back then and in the 40s. And then he worked his way up and got involved in real estate and got to the top to a point at Fifth Third where his boss was going to lose his job and Ken was going to get it. So his boss fired him, but didn't know that he walked across the street to this big realtor and started working the same day. And he did well with Schmidt Realtors. He bought one apartment building on
Is this the Oakley one that he bought first?
no. He bought one on Bennyville Street in Mount Washington.
One right past the street, right past the post office, isn't it? The one on the right?
That's Sutton.
No.
He started with Bennyville.
Oh.
And then he got two buildings on Mears Avenue, which was right around the corner from Bennyville. I think he had a building on Lehigh Avenue, but he didn't have that very long. And after that, it just blossomed. I mean, he got into buying a complex of apartments.
I got to sneeze, Greg. So.
He owns several of those. And that was what he was doing when he died. He was a real estate agent. He had office buildings and apartment buildings, all on the east side, except one area in Oakley, which he turned over to his son, Scott. And as far as I know, he still got it.
And so we go back. So we had a nun, a boy, a nun, and a boy. So he has kids, obviously.
Yes, he has 3 kids, Scott, Karen, and Kelly, and his wife is Sherry.
Okay, do you remember when they met, when they married?
They met at Fifth Third. Sherry also worked at Fifth Third. And they married in 1967. They were married downtown at St. Louis Church. There was supposed to be a big wedding, and then Sherry called it off for some reason. I went to Florida to think and get her act together, and so
It's all
they
at the same time?
Huh?
This was all within that same time?
Yeah.
Or did a long time elapse between when they were supposed to get married and they didn't? I've never heard this before.
Yeah, well, they were supposed to get married, I guess, at a church in Mount Washington, Presbyterian Church or something. Sherry was not Catholic. And at that time, it was hard to have a wedding if it was a mixed religion. But they went to some priest at St. Louis Church downtown, and they got permission to be married down there. It was just, I don't remember how long it was broken off, but a few weeks, I'm sure, maybe even a couple of months.
You don't know why? Just cold feet?
I don't know.
Never talked to her about it?
Mm-mm. No. It might have been that she thought Ken was taking too long to make the decision or what, but I did not ever hear the story of why it was broken off. And then they got married down there.
And she was much younger than him, right?
Yes, she is 13 years younger than Ken.
What'd your parents think of that? Did they have an opinion that they expressed to you?
My parents?
Mm-hmm.
Well, with my mother, none of us picked the right one to marry.
Was that your opinion, or did she state that to everybody?
She more or less stated she found something wrong with everyone. And with Sherry, it was not Catholic. And she knew Sherry's dad from Walnut Hills. When they lived in Walnut Hills, he was from Walnut Hills. And I don't know what she didn't like about him. She didn't like something about any of them. And she didn't care if she said it or not, you know, or what we felt. In other words, she was very outspoken, and with religion, she, you know.
Very religious.
Extremely. And,
do you think that was the reasoning behind 2 of her kids becoming nuns?
No, Dolores went through high school at St. Joe Academy, but she was in what they call the postulate, which is like you're going through your regular classes, but you're studying to become a nun. And then when she came out, she entered the convent. When she graduated, she entered the convent, went right in. So really she had spent from age 14 or 15 to the time she entered as a nun.
Okay. But you don't say much about what your dad thought. Was he just never expressive
Dad
of
was
anything?
very quiet.
He never said much.
He did not say much at all. And I had seen some pictures not too long ago of myself with Dad when I was about 6. And we lived on Hunley Road, and I was always with him when he went to the orchards, when he worked in his flower garden, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Don't go too far into him yet, but...
Yeah. But whether Mom's opinion had anything to do with Ken and Sherry breaking up, I don't think that did.
Now, from my perspective, since I didn't come along till much later, there was always the tradition of the Saturday night with Ken and Sherry. When did that start? Was that something that... Did you guys get along when you were younger, that level? Or when did it start that all of a sudden the Saturday thing to be was with Ken and
I don't
Sherry?
remember when that started. The kids. With the kids.
I guess when we had the kids.
Put the kids
I mean,
together.
we went out with them before that.
Yeah.
But it was just now and then. Then when kids started coming, it's harder to get out. So we would go to each other's houses and just maybe go out to dinner and then
Come home and play cards.
play cards at home. And
The question I have is why... What was there that was a connection where it was Ken and Sherry became that partner? I mean, it could have very easily, in my eyes, could have been Dick and Jane, or it could have been Evelyn and Bob, or something like that. Why was it that it was Ken and Sherry? Was it just the kids the same age?
close in age,
Pretty
yeah.
much, yes.
Yeah. I mean, like, Scott is a year older than Gary. And Karen is almost the same age as Gary. And then Kelly is just a year or 2 younger than Karen.
Mm-hmm.
And they all, you know, played together.
Plus they got that pool over there, and we go swimming over there on, what was that road?
No, didn't start with an H.
No,
Bernie?
No.
No,
No.
when they had the house back.
I know what you're talking about. It's past
The one that you go back and
Yeah. I don't know. Wherever Ken and Sherry's first house was, they had a pool.
Yeah.
Okay.
they had a swimming pool. Yeah.
Okay. But
it
there was
just
no
kind of
ulterior motive.
evolved.
Okay.
Evan Bob would be there a few times. But they wouldn't always want to go out. And we had Dolores there with us a couple of times when she was living by herself. And I think that they went out with Dick and Jane a few times, like we did, but I always said I was the best friend Ken had.
Why is that?
Well, we went out every week, and, he owned all these buildings, and he became somewhat, I don't know what you would call it, but I can remember one phone call he got from an old lady who lived in one of his apartment buildings, who said that she called him on Saturday, told him that the light was out in the hallway, and he said, then get a ladder and replace it. You don't call me on Saturday, I don't work on Saturday. It got very nasty. And I thought, that wasn't typical of Ken. But he did become somewhat of a landlord, and which I guess happens when you have so many people to deal with. But I felt bad for the old lady because she probably couldn't get on a ladder. And but as far as going out with him every weekend, I don't know how we got started doing that.
It just happened, that's all.
Okay. And then as he got older, he died in 98,
Yes,
and he died of,
cancer,
okay, what type?
esophageal cancer.
Smoking, most likely?
That's what the doctor said. He hadn't smoked for about 8 years. And he went on this big health kick of eating healthy foods and going to Lunken Airport and jogging 6 miles and going to other parks and doing 5 or 6 miles. And even after he had the cancer surgery, I think they told us that he was terminal. When he came home from the hospital, he was skin and bones, and he announced to us that he had walked 5 miles at a park. And he was very proud of himself. And I said, are you trying to kill yourself? Because he was really weak. And but that upset him that I would say that, and he told me I thought I knew everything, but I don't know if that was the same night we went out to dinner. But when we got home, got back to their house, I was in the family room, and your dad and Sherry were out looking for something in the newspaper, that she had all her papers out in the garage. So I was in there by myself, and Ken was in the bathroom, and I heard a loud thud. And I asked Ken if he was okay, and he didn't answer. So I kind of got the door open, and he was laying on the floor. This was in the laundry room. And I had to force the door open to get to him, and he had passed out. And I think they called the doctor and told him, but he had also had a drink at dinner. And the doctor said, you can't have alcohol when you're on this medication because you're going to pass out. And he passed out twice that night because he was laying there, and I was on the floor and had his head on my legs, and he said he came to and said he was okay, and he got up very quickly, and he passed out again. So that basically was, I think, the beginning of the end, because it wasn't too long after that he died. And he died around the same time that Dolores died, month-wise.
No, it was July.
It was in July. And it was a week before he turned 65. And the business goes on. Ken Realty. He sold his office building, his original office building, to Immaculate Heart of Mary Church. So it's now, they extended a new church there. It also had a daycare center, children's daycare center on the property, which is still going. But the office building was torn down. And that's about it for Kenneth.
Okay. And next in line?
Evelyn.
Evelyn. And she's still with us.
She is still here.
Okay.
And she...
well, how old is she now?
She is 76.
Okay.
So she was born in 1935. And...
would you say she was your closest sibling growing up?
No, because I was in the middle of spaces. Evelyn is like 6 years, almost 6 years older than me. Bev is almost 9 years younger than me. So I was pretty much on my own. I used to follow Evelyn around when we lived on Hunley Road. She called me her shadow, and sometimes would get really upset if she was with some friends and I'm tagging along, uninvited, and she'd get mad and they would all run away or something, and I'd just go back home. But she has...
Well, what was your biggest memory of her when you were younger? You have a memory of everybody else.
Not a whole lot, because of the age difference. Just, she was kind of quiet. She was kind of like Dad, didn't have a whole lot to say. I just didn't hang around her very much.
Didn't she leave to go with Bob when he was in the service? When they
got married.
When they lived out west, someplace?
When they got married.
Okay.
She was married in 1964 to Bob.
54.
Nab. 54, yeah. To Bob Nab. Who Mom didn't care for him either.
Why was that?
Because she thought he was lazy and he was always changing jobs. And you know, it just, I don't know what she was looking for us to have, other than what Sherry got in Ken, money. None of the rest of us married into, mountains of money.
Mm-hmm.
But they were married, and getting back to memories of Evelyn, like I said, I used to follow her around, but we weren't especially close. We still aren't. Very seldom talk to her. And, but we get along when we do. And anyway, when she got married, Bob was in the Air Force and had come back from Seoul, Korea. This was during the Korean War. And he was stationed in Enid, Oklahoma. So they were married, and Evelyn went out to Enid, Oklahoma with him. And while there, she got pregnant with...
They were married here, right?
Terry. And then she had Tom. And that was, they were here, back home in Cincinnati, and lived out in Mount Washington. I think. Yeah, they lived in Mount Washington, but I can't remember just
Oh, it's okay.
which house and
Okay.
when. And then in 1963, she had identical twin boys. What?
It was 61, I believe.
Hmm?
It was 61, wasn't it?
No. They were born the year before Dave.
Oh, okay. I'll shut up.
Anyway, they didn't know they were having twins.
There was no way to test for it, or they just didn't know at the time?
Back then, Greg, you didn't know anything about that.
It was just a
You
wild
didn't know-
guess. Even
we
when
didn't-
you guys were born, it was a guess.
It was a guess. We didn't know.
They didn't have all these tests so they could take pictures of the baby in the womb and
Gotcha.
all
We
that.
thought sure you would be a girl, because we all was boys.
Well,
we'll
he
get
told
to
me
that.
I was having a girl every time.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to that.
But anyway, they had the twins, Jim and Ken, which was a shock, especially to Bob, because they had, Tom and Terry were very young. I don't remember their exact ages, but they were just little kids. And they just kind of, lived their lives until the twins were maybe 17, and the one, Ken, had been kind of sick. They thought might have been the flu, but then he found a little knot on the back of his neck. So they went to the doctor. He had tests run, and he had testicular cancer. And it was stage 4 cancer, which is very serious. And they went to, they flew to Chicago and stayed with a cousin who was in the seminary, and went to a sperm bank there to save some of his sperm because he was going to have surgery and didn't know if he would have it. So when they got back, he had a testicle removed. Came through surgery fine. Did what exercises he could in the hospital. mostly hand and arm and things. And Jim, his twin brother, never had any signs of anything like that. And right now, Ken is clean. He's, 46? And is married to Susan, and they have a little bake shop where she makes cakes and cookies. And,
Yeah. Did Evelyn work at all?
Evelyn worked at Hospital Care Corporation. And let's see, and she worked, I don't know when she started with Mercy Hospital. Well, she had kids, so she didn't work when she was having all these babies. But when she went back to work, she got a job with Mercy Hospitals. And mainly worked at Claremont Mercy. I think that's the only hospital she worked at. I don't think she worked in Mariemont. But she retired from there a few years ago. And she is living the longest so far of the other siblings. She is 76, like I said, which the only other one who made it past 70 was Dick. And he died 3 months after Margie died.
And backtrack for a moment, Dick died of... Well, he had Alzheimer's.
He had Alzheimer's, and he had some Parkinson's disease. Never knew exactly what he had, but it wasn't cancer, according to Jane, his wife.
Okay. And what did Dolores die of? What did Dolores die of?
She had a form of leukemia. Chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Evelyn also has leukemia in remission, and she has chronic, I just had the word in my head, myelogenous, and she was diagnosed right after Margie died with that, but she is in remission on this medication that she has to take every day for the rest of her life.
Okay.
And her husband is celebrating his 80th birthday on the 19th.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll skip over you for the next time, and last but not least will be Bev.
Bev was born in 1950, and
do you remember when she was born? You were 8?
Vaguely, I remember Mom going, it was a very snowy night, and in, wait a minute, when's her birthday? November. Yeah, in November. And her saying that they had to take her on a sled from as far as Dad could get into the parking lot of the hospital, and they had to get a sled to take her into the hospital to have Bev. I think that's how it worked. But she was born in November, and then her nephew was born 6 months later in May, and that was Dick's oldest son.
Do you know any of the circumstances? Obviously it was an oops baby, Bev.
I think so. It was like, I think, uh-oh. You know. And
How old was your mom when she had her? In her 40s?
45, I think. 45 or 46. And, yeah, she kind of tagged along around me, but there again, there was a big age difference. And I was, going to school, and she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
She was home. So, and after or during high school, Bev met Wayne. And they were married in 1970. They have 4 children. And Wayne worked for...
Name the kids in order.
Then kids in order.
Exactly.
It's Kevin, who was born on Christmas Day. Stephen, David, and Julie. And I think they have 4 grandchildren now. Wayne worked for Heekin Can Company here, which is now Ball Jars. And he was transferred to Tennessee.
It's in the 80s.
Huh?
It was in the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s. And they've lived there ever since. The kids were basically raised in Tennessee. Kevin and Steve didn't go to school in Cincinnati very long before they were transferred down there to Tennessee. Don't see them very often, but they do have their grandkids, and Bev babysits for one, her Caitlin, and I think not every day, but a couple days a week. So
you don't have any stories of when you both were young? Because obviously there was a period of time when you both lived at home and that was it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really don't have many memories of Bev because I was doing my thing at school. I was gone all day and didn't get home until, after school. And I remember when Evelyn and Bob were married, Bev was a flower girl. And the reception was at our house on Hundley Road. And Mom and a couple of my aunts had made sandwiches and things ahead of time and frozen them. And they were setting things up and pouring wine. And didn't realize when they left the room that Bev was drinking the wine. She was 2. And that's the only time I can say I've seen a 2-year-old drunk. But that's the biggest memory of Bev, was getting drunk at age 2.
Okay.
On wedding wine. But she was a cute little kid. And she had a bariatric surgery several years ago, which almost killed her. But she's finally gotten that straightened out, and she lost a lot of weight. She always had a problem with being well overweight and tall. So she was a big woman. And she lost about 150 pounds. And when we were at a party for Bob's birthday last night, I was saying goodbye to her and facing her, and I said, we're almost eye to eye. I said, are you shrinking? And she said, yeah, she's shrinking. And we're almost the same height. So she was 5'8", I think. I was the shortest one of the 7. And always have been. Margie and Bev were the tallest. Dick and Kenny were average. Dolores was average, and so was Evelyn. Or is.
Okay, well, let's do we'll go 10 more minutes in the wrap-up stuff, and then we'll go to the next day. All right, so you have 6 siblings. 2 are still alive. A lot of cancer, it sounds like. Did your parents seem to have a favorite?
Margie.
Because of her Catholicism, heavy duty? Because
of her mission work, and in spite of the fact that Mom wanted her home to do mission work, it was always, what if something happens here? How are you going to know? And, some things that were kind of off track, because if you would just stop and think a second, they'd know. And there are plenty of people here where you could do the mission work and, trying to find things that she could do in the States rather than be in foreign countries.
And what about as grandparents? I mean, were they so their first grandkid was Dick's first kid?
Yes.
Were they, like you are now, when Jack was born, were they all about the grandkids and it was nothing but the grandkids?
No.
Or they didn't watch the grandkids? Your
No.
mom didn't do any sort of babysitting or anything?
No, very, very seldom.
Was that her choice, the kid's choice, or it was just a different time?
That was her choice. She told Mary she raised 7 kids. She wasn't going to raise theirs. And it went for everybody. But
did she say that to you? Or by the time it got to you, she was
I
pretty much...
I heard it enough, And the only time we asked her to watch the kids was when the tornado hit in 74. We had extensive damage, and Gary was just 2.5, and no, he was older.
He was 4.
Yeah,
Born
he was
70.
4, and Paul was 3, and Brian was crawling.
Yeah.
And we had spent the night at Mom's house. And she said we could leave the kids there to come here, back to our house, to start cleaning things up. Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't work well. I ended up calling Evelyn and asking her if she could go down and get the kids. And
no, why didn't it work well? Did your mom call you or something?
Mom was just impatient, and Gary was scared to death and was crying all the time, and she couldn't handle it. So I just said, if you don't mind, please go get him.
What about my parents? What were my parents doing?
I don't know what happened to Paul and Brian. I don't know if I kept Brian here. I don't remember. I know Dolores came over and helped.
Here. Yeah. But I mean, why didn't we give the kids to my parents? What was
I don't know.
I don't remember.
Unless we couldn't get to them.
Well, that's right.
Possibly.
Maybe they got hit over there too. Yeah, that's
No,
right.
they didn't get hit, but
Yeah.
Roads blocked and
But
stuff.
the roads were blocked over there, maybe. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that was the only time that your mom babysat?
yeah.
That just seems odd. So she had her kids and she was done, and she made that very clear.
Yep.
She made it very.
Now, what about your dad? Was he a doting grandfather? Was he pretty much the same, or he just never said?
Just,
Went with the flow?
yeah. Yeah, he
He didn't.
He
He didn't
was-
go to like kids' soccer games or baseball games or anything.
He didn't go to mine. I played baseball, softball. Didn't go to mine. He was kind of, how'd you do and how did practice go and that kind of stuff. But of course, you wouldn't catch my mother dead near a ball or water. Dad liked to swim, and when we would go to New Orleans, he and I would swim at Lake Pontchartrain. While Mom either sat in the car or sat under a tree or something and watched. But she had a fear of water, and she did not like sports.
She didn't drive.
She didn't drive. Tried one time and made too sharp a turn and hit a fence, and that was it. And that was with some friend who had taken her out to teach her and didn't work.
So, okay, I'm just trying to keep it all contained because we'll come back to more stuff when we do this again. But when was do you remember the last time that, well, I can't say that because he died. So, we know Grandpa died in 72.
Right.
Okay. You knew how long before, how long did you know before he died that was going to happen? Was it expected, or was it?
Well, according to the doctor, it wasn't something that we should expect because he said he did everything he could for him. He had a lung removed from, which was emphysema, cause he worked for a newspaper.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
And working with lead and smoking had caused the emphysema. Dad did not have the will to live with one lung. He said he couldn't do it. He couldn't work in his garden with one lung. And he couldn't have an oxygen tank with him wherever he went.
Did he express that to you, or is that something you heard?
He expressed that to, I think he expressed that to Mom. And he just made up his mind he couldn't live with one lung, and so he died.
But when do you know how long before he died in 72 when did he have this lung removed?
In November.
And he died in December? But going
No,
back...
he went in the hospital on October 9th because he was here for Gary's birthday. His second birthday, I guess.
October the 8th.
Yeah.
72, were we here then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, February, that's right.
And he was smoking. He was coughing. He was wheezing, and I said, why don't you quit smoking? Because he had quit smoking for a 12-year period.
Now, getting very specific, do you remember that exact day? That Gary's second birthday when he was here? Do you remember the details of that? Like he was sitting in there and he was smoking and all that kind of stuff?
I was standing in the living room, and he was on the steps coming up from somewhere, and he was reaching through the railing to put out a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed his breathing. It was
Yeah,
hard for him to breathe.
I remember
It
that.
was almost like a gasp.
And you recall this too?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
And
good here for that. Yeah.
that's when I said, you know, you should quit smoking those things. Yeah. But then at that time I was smoking too. So, but I didn't know that he was as sick that day as he was. But the twins were born on October 9th. I don't know if he made it to their party, but he did go in the hospital right after being here. And they diagnosed him and told him, you know, what he had and what they were going to have to do. And I know he was in a lot of pain from the surgery, but he had said to me one time, I can't live like this. And Margie had come into town, and I was running her over to see him. And it was just a lot of running back and forth, and that's when I found out that I was pregnant with Brian. And when I told Dad, he just said, "Oh my God."
Like what?
Like I had Gary, I had Paul, and there I was pregnant again,
Mm-hmm.
because they were close together.
Yeah.
And I thought he'd be happy to hear about it, but that was his reply, was, "Oh my God." And then later on, the nurse came in and said that, she said, "Boy, your face is really rosy. Your cheeks are so rosy." And she took his temperature, and he had pneumonia. And then it wasn't long after that he died. So I guess he died from pneumonia, complications of surgery.
And everybody was here when he died? Margie was here and...
I can't remember if Margie was still here.
No, she was here. You said she came in. When did she come in? When he went to the hospital.
When he was in the hospital, because
How
I
long
took her
after-
over a couple times.
How long after he was in the hospital did he die? I don't remember.
December.
October 9th he went in. When did he die?
December something or not.
December 2nd.
2 months. That was a couple months later, yeah. 'Cause he,
Well,
was he in that
actually-
hospital that long time? That 2
Yeah,
months? Yeah,
from October
I
on.
remember going down there. I don't know whether
What hospital?
St. Francis.
the
which
one
is
down
now
on used to be down there at what's that street, Jim?
Queen
If you
City.
take Western Hills Viaduct and go across
Queen City.
Queen City there, you know, if you go down that hospital where Grandma died,
Yeah.
that used to be the hospital right there.
Gotcha.
That used to be St. Francis.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's.
Why did he end up way over there?
It's a school or something now, isn't it? Or,
I guess it's because the doctor, the
yeah, I was
surgeon,
wondering.
was on staff there.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did... And it's a simple question, but I mean, how did your mom take it? Were you concerned at all for her well-being as far as emotional wreck, or was she... Did she handle it? I mean, what was...
She
her-
handled it because I think they had kind of grown apart in the later years. Dad would, you know, she would sit and gripe and complain, and he'd just listen and drink his beer.
He was a beer drinker?
He was a beer drinker, and he ate Limburger cheese with onion and rye bread.
That sounds gross.
And sometimes he'd get it in a block form, and that stuff was really potent. But you know, he just let it go over his head. And he didn't have much to say to her. And she told me when he was in the hospital, she said, he just won't talk to me. She said, I really don't think he loves me anymore. And, you know, I didn't know what to say, but I kind of suspect they just grew apart just from lack of communication. Mm-hmm. And, you know, mom was always griping about somebody, and he got along with everybody, but he just was so quiet. We have him on tape at Gary's first birthday, and he said something, and I don't know what it was, mm-hmm. but it was very low and soft, and that's the way he talked, even when he'd get mad. And we always knew when he was mad because his lips would be drawn really tight. It was like, uh-oh.
Was that often? Did he have a temper?
No. Just went along, and I used to drop him off at work on my way to Good Sam when I was working there. And we wouldn't talk a whole lot going downtown. And he would jump out of the car while the light was red so I could just go on. And
okay,
yeah.
We'll get to that later. I guess the last thing was, do you remember the last time after he died that everybody was together?
After he died?
Well, let me put that a different way. After both of your parents died, because that would have been like 93 at some point. Do you remember the last time that you were together with all your siblings in one room? Because figuring Dolores died in 96.
I guess at Christmas. And it would have been at Kent's house on Bishop's Bridge. Mm-hmm. And what are you whispering over
Nothing.
there?
I said yes, that would have been it.
Was there a lot of times during the the 50s and 60s would be the only times to look at? Were there a lot of times where everybody was together, or was it very rare because Margie traveling and Dolores being a nun that?
Well, we were never all together, except when the rare times, if they would come into town, then we would all make it, to Mom and Dad's house, where they didn't stay there, but they would visit there all day.
Margie and Dolores.
Yeah. They stayed at the convent.
So there weren't like a tradition of Christmas or anything or Thanksgiving where everybody was together. It just didn't happen.
It didn't happen because they weren't around.
Yeah.
Mom wanted it to be that way, but, with the age differences and some on their, out on their own, living their own lives, and others still at home, and it was just impossible to get everybody together at one thing at one time.
Okay, and then to wrap up this whole line of thinking here, were all the siblings, did everybody kind of get along? Was it just kind of we're related and we'll get along, or were there anybody who, like Brian and Paul, was there anybody who was, here's the clique over here that's really tight, or was it just kind of everybody was just related?
Oh, we all got along, but none of us were really tight, and there again, the age factor came into play.
But, I mean, Dolores, Dick, Ken, Evelyn were all sort of similar in age. Margie, sorry. They weren't, super tight or anything like that you're aware of?
I guess, but I don't know.
Okay.
I know Margie would Mom used to always tell a story about Margie going across Salem Pike to, which is now Beachmont Acres Playground or something.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing there. It was just a muddy field. It had been raining, and Margie walked out and was stuck in the mud, and Mom had to go in and get her. She kept telling her not to go in, and she went anyway until she couldn't move. So she got heck for that. But as far as Dolores being close to Dick, I think they were when they were young, because they were only 11 months apart.
Did anybody have any big blow-ups with somebody else? Were there any big distances between anybody outside of time?
Mm-mm. No. We all get along. And got along. We would say things to each other, like,
Hang on, we'll let it... So people in the future will know what we're listening to.
Yeah. Is that not cute? See?
Okay. But big blow-ups, any issues that were major?
No, only whatever Mom would be mad about at certain times, and she would blow up and speak her mind.
But there was nothing in between the siblings? It was more towards your mom?
It was more towards Mom, because she would just say what was in her head.
And were you all kind of in agreement towards her, of her issues?
Oh, yeah. Ken used to talk about how Mom would call him at the office, and he'd sit the phone down on his desk, and she would talk, and every once in a while he would say, yeah.
And this is when she was by herself, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Which is really nasty when you think about it. But, she was always calling him, too, for different things. And, of course, Margie, I'm sure she would have done the same thing if she were here,
mm-hmm.
With being pestered about coming home.
Do you know if there was any... Do you know anything about the relationship? It's just... The last question is a very interesting thought. Do you know anything of what the relationship was like between Dolores and Bev? Because there was such an age gap.
Bev?
Between Dolores and Bev, did you know anything about their relationship? Did they really see each other as sisters, or was
they didn't know each other. I mean, Dolores was a nun and
could have been her
in
mother.
New Orleans, and Bev was just a baby.
Yeah.
And
I mean, when they were older, before Dolores died, you don't know anything about their relationship. It just seems like an interesting dynamic to have somebody that much older than you, technically as your sister.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not that far. How did you think of Dolores as a sister?
Not for a long time. I used to call her Stir. Yes, stir, no stir.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, she would ask me, are you doing okay in school? Yes, sir.
Oh.
Sister.
Gotcha.
Okay. And it wasn't until I was in my teens, that I guess it hit home that this is my sister. I knew she was my sister, but I never saw her.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't know her when she went in the convent. So it was all new to me. Now Margie, I knew her because she lived at home for a while before she went in the convent.
Yeah.
So, But the relationship between Dolores and Bev, I don't know how close it was. Bev was kind of like that. She'd get along with everybody. She feels like a loner now and that she's been abandoned because she lives in Tennessee. And the only time they see anybody is when they come up here. And their kids are scattered in Tennessee and Virginia and, different areas. But as far as closeness, I don't know what their relationship was like.
Okay. Just an interesting thought. All right. Okay, because now she's continued to talk while I'm packing stuff and putting it away. So you didn't. No one liked Mary. Why?
Just because she did not like our family either. And when she threw Dick out of the house after 10 pregnancies and 7 living children.
This is your mom?
No, this is Mary.
Oh, Mary.
She told him that she never did love him. And, he was kind of stunned, I guess, because of all the kids they had, but she never loved him.
Okay, so hindsight's 20/20, and you look back now through the image of saying she was a she-devil, but did you not like her? Like in the 60s, I see those home movies where he's sitting there in a skinny tie and Bob's sitting there in a skinny tie and there's Mary sitting there. At that point, were people behind the back saying, I don't like her? And it was after she kicked Dick out?
When Mary was around, we tolerated her, and we were not unfriendly to her.
No.
Well, I'm not saying unfriendly. I'm saying, was she one of the types of people that before she kicked Dick out, you'd say, we don't really like her?
I don't know about anybody else. I know I could take her or leave her. I didn't care one way or the other. But I did make sure I included their kids individually with Christmas presents and birthday cards with money and things like that. And I guess that was kind of a thorn in her side that I was the only one in the family who did that. So one Christmas I got a wallet with $5 in it from them. And I just found the $5 about 10 years ago. So
you found?
We mean you found it in the wallet?
Yeah.
You had the wallet put away somewhere?
Yeah.
Oh, around here? Obviously around here.
Yeah, it was around here. And I looked through, I thought, oh, there's a $5 bill in there.
It's probably worth something, huh?
Yeah.
Probably worth more than 5.
I doubt it.
Well, I wasn't that old. Jeez. But no, everybody would tolerate Mary when she was around, but
Is she still alive?
It was very uncomfortable.
Well, I'll leave it running for 2 more minutes and we can do the catty out of school stories. What about, so Mary, nobody really liked Mary.
Except Margie. She and Mary got along very well.
Well, you said they went to school together.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bob, what did you think of Bob when Evelyn first started going out? Any thoughts?
Well, who's going to see this film?
We'll walk it away. They're not going to see it.
Well, I just, under Mom's influence, she didn't care for Bob. He's just from a hillbilly family, blah, blah, blah.
Hillbilly family? What does that mean?
Hillbilly family?
No, where did he, was he from Nowheresville, Kentucky or something?
No. They lived up on Asbury Road in a little, the house is long.
I haven't heard the word hillbilly. I'm trying to
No, I know what hillbilly is. I'm just saying I can't imagine Bob Knapp being from a hillbilly, but I don't know anything about the man. So.
Well, they just, not the brightest in
Yeah.
the world. His mom would.
So you didn't think much of him when Evelyn was going out because...
I could take him or leave him, you know.
Did you have an opinion on anyone?
Um.
Okay, so Bob... But you get along well with Bob, or there's no specific...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
get along now. Yeah.
Alright, so we got Bob. So Sherry, what did you think of Sherry when you first met her? I mean, she was almost your age, if not younger.
No, she was
She's younger.
She was
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah. Just by a couple of years.
Okay, but what did you think of her when Ken first started going out with her? Any opinion?
She was. I thought she was kind of snobby,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, we didn't have a good opinion of her.
And when he gave her a ring and she was at the house, we were at the house too. And I can remember her sitting on the edge of the couch, very erect. And Mom was talking to her about something, and I'm sure she had brought up children to be baptized in the church. And having a Catholic wedding, you know. But other than snobbish, you know, I knew that she came from I mean, her mom and dad weren't extremely wealthy, but they were wealthy. And it was almost the thoughts of, that's what she was looking for. But Ken didn't have his money then.
Mm-hmm.
And she did work. She still works. You know, helping him getting his business going.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a very nice person, but she's also one who will tell you what she thinks. Which there again is...
Is that how she butted up against your mom?
She got along with Mom okay. Sherry can be compassionate as opposed to her younger sister, Vicky, who always had something smart alecky to say about my mom and dad. But, you know, I found out that Sherry can be very compassionate. She would go help Mom if it was necessary, you know, go visit. And so would Mary. But Mary would, you know, put Mom down, and I don't know what else she said, but she would leave and Mom would be in tears. And Dad would know whenever Mary visited because he'd come home from work and she was in tears. What all was said, I don't know. But Mary did not like Mom. And she'd come out and do her thing,
Mm-hmm.
or say whatever she said. Sherry never did that. And I think it kind of irked Mom because we got to be so close friends with Ken and Sherry, and we would see them, and she, every once in a while, she'd say, well, why don't you ask Dolores to go with you sometime? Or why don't you come here to see me? Or what about Evan Bob? Blah, blah. You know, and it was, she'd make me feel guilty for not having a big family gathering to go out to dinner on Saturday night,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and play cards. And
And what about, last but not least again, what about Wayne? What were your thoughts of Wayne? I mean, you said she knew him from high school.
yeah.
So you must have known him from very early on.
Well, yeah, I knew him. When they had a group, I don't know, maybe it's still around, it was called Up With People, and it was a singing group.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both in that. And I think that's where she met him. Because they were in that together during high school.
Did it always just seem like it was inevitable that's who she would end up with, or did you never give it any thought?
Well, after she was dating him for a while, I thought, well, this is probably it, because Bev did not date a lot because she was heavy. And, during those times, fat wasn't beautiful, so you don't go out with anybody who's heavy. And that's why we've all been so obsessed with losing weight. Bev went through all that surgery and stuff to lose weight. And she's by no means skinny, but she's thinner than she's ever been.
And you never knew what your parents thought of Wayne?
There again,
because I have a one-word description so far for everybody. Where Mary was a witch, Bob was a hillbilly, Sherry was stuck-up princess. So what was Wayne? Or was there no opinion of him?
I never heard Mom say too much about Wayne.
Was he a Catholic?
No.
So that was yet another strike again.
No, but by the time we got down to that, it was poor Bev and Wayne and poor Evan Bahal.
For what?
That we would hear from Mom all the time.
Poor? What do you mean by poor?
Oh, they have so many problems, and they, and I don't know why Ken can't share his money.
Oh, you're talking about later on here. I'm talking about early on.
Early on, I don't know if Mom had an opinion of him or not. I know that she learned from Bev that his dad was nasty, beat his mother, and would beat him up once in a while. And, by the way, his dad died yesterday morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Lexington. On the way up, yeah. He's been in the hospital, though. He's been sick. He hated Bev.
I think Mom felt they were too young, because Bev, they got married right out of high school. And which they were young and didn't really know what they were doing, as far as setting up housekeeping and managing their money and stuff. And not to say that I do, but that was about the biggest drawback, was his family history of his father beating up on everybody.
Did everyone know about that when he was around, or was that kind of common knowledge?
Yeah, I think we all knew about it.
I never knew about it. But
yeah, I think we knew about it.
that's the first time.
I think Bev might have said something about it. That,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Daddy's gone now.
Do what?
His dad is gone now, and the load off of Bev, because he did not like Bev.
Ever?
No. Every time he would come to their house, he would tell her she was a lousy mother and didn't raise her kids right. And
did you ever meet this man?
yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, he came to the wedding.
Did he? I don't remember.
Yeah. There's pictures of Bev and Wayne with Wayne's mom and then her dad. And they stood, there was big space, there was space for at least another person between his dad and his mother. Because they were divorced. They got divorced when he was in school yet, I think.
Gotcha. All right.